Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post your questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor at Federal News Radio 1500 and federalnewsradio.com.
Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Tom Cicella, the Director of the Army Operations and Architecture in the Office of the CIO G6, Daniel Corbin, the Chief Technology Advisor for C4 Headquarters for the U.S. Marine Corps, Randall Conway, the Deputy CIO for Information Enterprise for the Defense Department, Larry Reed, the Assistant Director for Security Operations at the Justice Department, and Bill Rowan, the Vice President of Federal for VMware. Gentlemen, welcome to the program today. Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Moving any enterprise to the cloud presents obviously new challenges, particularly as data is moved off premises. Over the last 7+ years, agencies have faced many of those challenges as they decide what type of services in the cloud they need to implement. Many agencies are finding that a hybrid, or what they call a multi-vendor cloud environment, makes the most sense for them. In fact, the General Services Administration said in a 2016 Best Practices for Cloud Guide that hybrid or multi-vendor environment can rely on a broker model to federate applications, data, security, and other services. This means agencies need to adjust to new operational and managerial models, including the concept that security needs to move with the application no matter which commercial or government cloud it sits in, and no matter how employees access that app or data from a laptop, from a desktop, from a tablet, from a mobile device. The continued and ever-growing reliance on mobile devices also opens the door for the need for new thinking. Through the use of orchestration and optimization, agencies can create a security model that fits their employees' needs. And of course, that leads us down the path toward thin clients, zero clients, to better enable these devices while also keeping data and apps secure. Now, experts say other issues like interoperability, the use of containers to ease portability, and the development of microservices also are key ingredients to a successful multi-cloud effort. So with that context in place, again, my guests today are Tom Cicella, the Director of Army Operations and Architecture in the Office of CIO G6, Daniel Corbin, the Chief Technology Advisor for C4 Headquarters for the U.S. Marine Corps, Randall Conway, the Deputy CIO for Information Enterprise for the Defense Department, Larry Reed, the Assistant Director for Security Operations at the Justice Department, and Bill Rowan, the Vice President of Federal for VMware. Let me start our conversation today by turning to Randall. You get the 50,000-foot view from the Defense Department perspective. Give us an update on where DoD is with cloud, with this idea of multi-vendor environment.
For us, this whole cloud adoption falls in my lane, and I'm a big advocate for it. It's part of our larger compute and storage strategy in the Department of Defense, and we're seeking cloud solutions for infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. And we are not selective about who the cloud provider is. That all gets caught up in the contracting strategy and the contracting details and what applications we intend to move there, but via what type of impact level they have. And so if it's like impact level 4 or 5, then we're going to want to, if there's a certain cloud provider that does that for us based on their certifications. But by and large, we make this part of our larger cloud and compute storage strategy, and we have to embrace it because there's so much value in it, okay, in terms of what we can do to save money and to be more efficient, and it scales well. And so our whole goal in DoD is to make sure that we get our military departments the ability to contract and acquire cloud services in some kind of organized fashion, and that we try to remove the impediments from them so that they can do that adoption. And you know, each service moves at their own pace based on how they their culture and how they're structured. But everybody sees a lot of benefit in what we do with cloud. And so we will have some on-prem, we will have some off-premise, and those are all part of the solution set. We have virtual capabilities, so it doesn't have to be a physical space on a military installation. It could be a virtual and still be considered an on-prem. So we are basically doing our best to remove all barriers to getting to cloud solutions.
So I know someone from the Defense Information Systems agency is not here, but talk a little bit about the Mil Cloud. That's the most recent contract award, right, and access point. And I know we'll hear from some of your colleagues in the Marine Corps and the Army in a minute.
Yeah, it was recently awarded, and then there was the contract winner. Their name is out there. But this was a scenario where we put MilCloud 2.0 in a DISA deck or a DISA core data center, and it becomes a situation where it provides a multi-service capability, but it's co-located in the DISA deck. And what it does for us, though, is it gives us a lot more potential and scalability than what we had in the previous MilCloud 1.0. And I think the reason it's MilCloud is simply because the naming convention kind of suited the fact that it was for DoD, it was on DoD premises, and it's sort of a legacy name. It doesn't mean that it can't be a commercialized name, but that's just what we call it. So it's really wide open as to what we can put in there. And it's a big win for us, and I think that the contractor that won it, based on their past performance in other areas, that they will do well with it.
All right, let me jump over to Daniel now. As you heard Randall say, he talked a little bit about everyone's going to kind of go at their own pace. So tell us about the Marine Corps' efforts around cloud.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for having me here. Randy does bring up a lot of good points. Talks about some of the benefits, but also some of the other shortfalls of cloud services, the security things that are still being worked out, so that we can guarantee access to the data and the security of that data as we go forward. But I'd like to first start by sort of lay out the context under which the Marine Corps is operating and the direction that the Commandant has said that we are going to go with respect to providing information to our users. Our primary user, from our perspective, is always the Marine who's out there doing the business of the Marine Corps. But we also have the business side that we have to deal with as well. So the strategy that we are putting in place embraces commercial cloud services, but our primary place for cloud services will be in our core data center in Kansas City. It's called the Marine Corps Enterprise IT Center. We will establish cloud services there, and where it makes sense, we will use commercial cloud services as well. We are taking a very deliberate approach to ensure that we have the full set of cloud competencies that are necessary. How do you buy it? How do you operate under it? How do you get data in there? How do you get applications in there? How do you get the information out of there? All of those various things that you have to consider when you're using a services. But ultimately, what we are going to get to the point is that we are going to have, I mentioned the warfighter at the end that we're actually here to support. We are putting in place an architecture that will allow us to have our core data centers, which is a hybrid of commercial and on-prem public private cloud services. We'll have IPNs that interoperate with that, and then this concept that we've been pursuing for over a year now, called our TPNs, tactical processing nodes, and our tactical cloudlets, which will allow us to move both logic and data out to the far edge, and then the user will get access to the best data available. Maybe it's the next higher cloud, but wherever that is, we're going to make that available to them.
All right.
So that's the context.
So a couple things here: IPNs, TPNs, and I called it TCLs, but maybe that's my own acronym. The IPN is the I'm going to put you on the spot.
Installation processing nodes.
Okay, and these are stuff at the specific installations that can help.
That's correct. And what will happen is those are sort of the jumping off point for the guy in the tactical users. It's where we have our enterprise services today that are regionalized.
And the goal, generally speaking, is to use those nodes to get out to the warfighter more quickly, more easily, more smoothly.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to clarify it, because as soon as you get into you start hitting the acronyms in DoD, and you've lost half of us. So, all right, we're going to skip over Larry for a second, because I want to continue the DoD conversation and go to Tom here. Tom's with the Army. So Tom, let's respond to what you've heard so far from Daniel and Randy about the cloud and where his Army fits.
Sure. So the Army's following a similar strategy. I mean, obviously we follow Nest under the DoD from the IT perspective, but we have a multi-tenant, multi-fabric sort of cloud environment that we're building as well, both on-prem and off-prem. We're doing the pilot at Redstone right now just to prove out what the art of the possible really is in terms of taking a contractor-owned, contractor-operated cloud environment, sticking it on an Army installation. Simultaneous to that, we're working on a thing called the enterprise computing environment. I think we're calling it a concept right now versus a strategy, which will very quickly over the next probably 30, 60 days move into our enterprise computing architecture design work that we're doing. And so the goal here, the primary goal for the Army from an enterprise computing fabric perspective is to create an environment that is global in nature to support and drive the mission of the Army, which in large part is the warfighting mission. It needs to support not only the tactical folks as well as the folks that are back in what we know as the generating force or the business office workers. And so we're doing that through this combination of not only multi-vendor but also multi-deployment patterns, on-prem, off-prem, commercial cloud where it's available, and then on-premise cloud where that's capable, and then pushing the computing to the fringe as well. And I was just listening to Dan here. I was thinking, well, maybe the Army should be partnering with the Marines because we're generally at the same place at the same time. The Marines being a little bit more expeditionary, pretty further out on the fringe. But this is an example where I think we really could partner up on that because the tactical environment, what is known for us as the disadvantaged users, right? They're either occasionally connected or disconnected completely, don't have the luxury of using the quote-unquote traditional cloud, the internet-based cloud options. As well as all of our users that are on the classified fabrics, is another area where we're focusing more on the what is known as Impact Level 6, more of the on-prem kind of capabilities, and how do we push those services. You mentioned microservices in the opening. How do we push those services down to the users and need them when they need them, right? And it's a 24/7 operation. We can't just wait for the services to become available. We need to make sure that we're being proactive about this. And so that's really where my role comes in terms of bridging the architecture and operations. So we're defining the capabilities, defining the services, and then funding and directing programs through the CIO G6, through the entire Army, to develop these applications through our program executive offices and partnering with other military departments and services, as well as the larger DoD and commercial environments.
So I like playing matchmaker. If you and Daniel can have a discussion afterwards, that'd be a win-win for all of us. Let me turn to Larry Reed from Justice. You just heard a bunch of DoD folks talk all about what they're doing. Let's talk about Justice Department. Kind of a different perspective, but still very similar in the sense of you have a wide breadth to cover and a lot of people in the field.
It is. So a lot of the, we don't have the warfighters. We have agents out in the field doing similar kind of environments anyway, in terms of on a less regular basis, obviously, but we do have taken a lot of the same approaches we heard about just a couple minutes ago in terms of building the infrastructure that can be there for the mission folks that are doing the work. We are looking across public and some private clouds. We have the core data centers where we're putting some of the private cloud services. We're using a lot of the Gov Cloud environments that some of the vendors have created for the infrastructure as a service. We also have a little bit more, I would guess, use of the software as a service in the public space, and we've pushed a lot on that. The real challenges on that is bringing it all together in a coherent picture that provides just the service the mission owners are looking for, where they're looking for it, and how they're looking for it. And so mobile plays a lot into that. VDI plays a bit into that as well as we start pushing those things out. And consolidating or reorganizing our data centers to support that transition.
So two things we'll touch upon, but let me just get you to offer a little more. Mobile VDI, is that in process, or is that the begin? Are you guys just saying this is an option for the Justice Department? So
we have some VDI infrastructure that's up and running today. We're looking at how best to serve that out of cloud environments and some of the cloud service providers to get it closer to the consumers of the service. Mobile is pretty big for us as well, as we have people in the field and traveling and moving around pretty regularly. So we've got a bit in both already.
All right, so I know we'll talk more in a little bit. All right, Bill, you've been very patient. You've been sitting here listening to this very interesting set of different takes, but I hear a lot of similarities. Let's just react a little bit to what you heard.
Well, I think what we, starting with what Randy had to say in the opening about MilCloud and what that changes, it's really mimicking what's happening in the enterprise, in the commercial enterprises. If you look at what is happening, most of the Fortune 1000 are looking at combinations of both on-prem and those services that they can leverage off-prem. If I look at what the Department of Defense, and in many ways Justice also to a different degree, but if we look at the on-site managed service contract from DoD, if we look at the Army private cloud project that Tom spoke about, if we look at what the Navy is doing with the Advanced Ballistics Lab up in West Virginia, who has both defense and civilian agency customers residing in that data center, this move to this on-prem, quote, public cloud type environment, almost ostensibly what the CIA did with the C2S program, I think it's offering a lot of flexibility. At the same time, what of those services that can be leveraged from a commercial environment? We see this, if, for example, under the CJIS program, where Justice has helped put out a framework, and for those states that want to leverage that environment, they can do that from a public cloud provider, while at the same time being able to reach back into the Justice's CJIS environment inside of West Virginia. I think what is really interesting that will change this, continue to keep this conversation going is, and it was touched upon too from a software as a service, as software vendors change their model, and probably the best example of that is Microsoft, as the move towards Office 365. Historically, the desktop infrastructure environment's been built off that core services environment that needs to be built out. That is now offered as a service, whether through a Microsoft Azure type cloud or through some other mechanism, potentially DISA. It is allowing a change downstream to the way the agencies then use their desktop or mobile infrastructure to manage that environment. That's got a secondary cost savings beyond the traditional hosting model, and I think that's going to drive another layer of change down the path.
Tom and Daniel, both of you are shaking your heads. Tom, jump in real quick.
Yeah, so you mentioned the second order effect. So we have a lot of conversations about the efficiencies and effectivities of the cloud environment from the Department of Defense, and there's a real push to save money, right? So we don't necessarily in the Army believe that saving money is the primary driver for going to cloud, right? It's being more effective and more efficient in providing services to our warfighters and to our customers, right? The second order effect should be really, are we going to save money over the long term? And then there's third order effects, which is as we move to more away from infrastructure as a service into platform as a service and software as a service, there's a natural drawdown of the number of individuals, bodies, personnel that are required to run the infrastructure, right? And so what we can do is we can take our valuable resources that are scarce in nature and really put them in the most important areas where they need to be, which is managing our information, managing our infrastructure, services, rather than running servers and operating systems and patching data centers and whatnot. So we really are trying to pull our IT workforce out of the core IT business and moving it up into the managing IT as a service for our customers, so that the customers can turn around, pull themselves out of the IT business, right, and really manage their mission and manage their data and manage their applications so that they can be more effective and efficient for their mission.
All right. Daniel, when you hold your thought, when we come back from break, we'll jump back in. I saw Bill shaking his head too, so we got a lot more to talk about, but we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the panel discussion, Implementing a Multi-Cloud Strategy, sponsored by VMware on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.